When I first moved to Chicago, everything seemed to fall into place almost magically. I was 26, fresh out of graduate school, and eager to start my new job at a publishing house. The excitement of finally beginning my adult life in a bustling city made me feel like I was on the edge of something big, like the next chapter of my life was opening right before my eyes. I didn't have much money saved up, but I was determined to find a small apartment that I could make my own. After weeks of searching, I stumbled across a listing that felt too good to be true, a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, close to the train, with rent that was just barely within my budget. I arranged a viewing right away. That's how I met Mr. Anderson, the landlord. He was in his late 50s, with graying hair, kind eyes, and a calm presence. Unlike some landlords I had met before, he didn't act impatient or cold. Instead, he asked about my work, my family, and my goals. When I explained how nervous I was about living alone in the city for the first time, he smiled and reassured me. "This place has been good to a lot of young professionals starting out," he said warmly. "I think you'll do just fine here." I signed the lease the very next day, and by the end of the week, I was moving in. The apartment wasn't fancy, just a cozy one-bedroom with hardwood floors, old-fashioned kitchen cabinets, and a little balcony that overlooked the street. But to me, it was perfect. The first few months went smoothly. I decorated with thrift store finds, invited coworkers over for coffee, and even grew a little herb garden on the balcony. Rent wasn't easy to keep up with, but I always made it work. At least until things started to shift. It all began when my publishing job hit a rough patch. A few big contracts fell through, and the company cut everyone's hours. Suddenly, my paycheck was much smaller, and for the first time, I felt the heavy weight of city living. Bills piled up, groceries got more expensive, and rent, my biggest monthly expense, loomed over me like a storm cloud. By the third month of reduced hours, I knew I was in trouble. I sat at my small kitchen table late at night, staring at the numbers on my budget sheet, trying to make them stretch further than they could. No matter how many times I recalculated, the truth was clear. I didn't have enough to cover rent. I dreaded the day I would have to tell Mr. Anderson. He had always been kind, but a lease was a lease. I expected him to give me a notice, maybe 30 days to pack up and leave. The thought of losing my little apartment, the first place I had ever truly called my own, broke my heart. Finally, one evening after work, I gathered my courage and walked downstairs to his office. He looked up from a stack of papers when I entered. "Emily," he greeted me kindly. "What brings you here?" My voice wavered as I explained the situation. I don't think I can pay rent this month. My hours were cut at work, and I've been trying to catch up, but I just can't make the numbers work. I understand if you need me to move out. I just wanted to be honest with you." For a moment, silence hung between us. I braced myself for disappointment. But instead of anger, Mr. Anderson leaned back in his chair and folded his hands thoughtfully. Then he said something I never expected. "There's another way you can stay." My heart skipped a beat. His tone wasn't harsh or manipulative, it was calm, almost gentle, but his words carried weight. "Another way?" I asked, unsure what he meant. He nodded slowly. "Over the years, I've had tenants fall into tough spots. Life happens. Jobs change, bills get overwhelming, health issues come up. I don't like to throw people out if I can help it. Sometimes, if a tenant is struggling, we work out an alternative arrangement." I felt a flicker of hope. "What kind of arrangement?" He smiled faintly. "Well, the building always needs upkeep. There are small repairs, painting jobs, cleaning tasks, and even bookkeeping work that I can never seem to get around to. If you're willing to lend a hand, I'd be open to reducing part of your rent. It wouldn't cover everything, but it might buy you some time until you get back on your feet." Relief rushed through me so quickly that tears welled in my eyes. "Are you serious? You'd let me do that?" "Of course," he said. "You're a good tenant, Emily. You take care of the place, you're respectful, and you've always been on time until now. I'd rather keep someone like you here than start over with a stranger." I could hardly believe it. Instead of facing eviction, I was being given a chance. The twist in my situation wasn't cruel, it was unexpectedly kind. The very next week, I started helping out around the building. Mr. Anderson gave me a list of small tasks: repainting the chipped stairwell walls, scrubbing down the laundry room, organizing some old tenant files in his office. None of it was glamorous work, but I didn't mind. In fact, I found it strangely grounding. After long hours of sitting at a desk in my publishing job, it felt good to use my hands and see immediate results. Days turned into weeks, and soon I was balancing my reduced work hours with building duties. Sometimes I worked late into the evening, humming to myself as I painted or swept. Mr. Anderson often stopped by to check on my progress, offering encouragement or sharing stories about the building's history. I learned that he had owned the property for over 20 years and had practically poured his life into keeping it afloat. Through our conversations, I began to see him in a new light. He wasn't just a landlord. He was a man who cared about his tenants, who had weathered his own financial storms, and who believed in second chances. As months passed, something surprising happened. My job at the publishing house stabilized again, but by then, I had grown so attached to the work I was doing for Mr. Anderson that I asked if I could continue. He agreed, this time paying me a little extra on top of reduced rent. Slowly, my financial stress lifted. But the biggest twist came not from the work itself, but from the community I found because of it. By being so involved in the building, I got to know my neighbors better. I fixed a leaky faucet for Mrs. Peterson in 2B, helped carry groceries for the young couple upstairs, and even organized a small block party with Mr. Anderson's blessing. What started as desperation turned into connection, responsibility, and pride. Looking back, I realized that losing hours at work had felt like the worst thing that could happen to me, but in truth, it pushed me into a new chapter of life I never would have found otherwise. All because my landlord said, "There's another way you can stay." And I never expected the twist to be this. I found not just a way to keep my apartment, but a community, a mentor, and a reminder that sometimes kindness shows up in the most unlikely of places.